This virtue can be somewhat contentious, so I want to be careful. In many ways, turned work ethic into something it was never supposed to be. We celebrate the grind, glorify the 14-hour day. We wear exhaustion as a badge of honor, and treat busyness as proof that we are doing something meaningful. Social media is full of people filming themselves at 4 a.m, telling you that the reason you are not successful is that you are not working hard enough. Some of that is true, but most of it is incomplete. Because hard work aimed at the wrong thing is just expensive movement. And hard work that never includes investment in yourself is just a slow way to empty the cup. You do not do the work day after day when no one is watching and no one is clapping. Those virtues stay on the shelf. The shift is not working less. It's directing some of that work ethic inward, toward the foundation, toward becoming a more capable person, so that when you return to the demands, you have more to give, not less. All right, speaking of, let's get into today's podcast episode is on work ethic. So for those who are just listening for the first time, each episode we go over one chapter in the book that I'm writing, Transferable Everything. And I begin by providing an overview, and then we sort of dissect it as a virtue, as a topic, and maybe uncover some things that need to be changed, added, or otherwise within the chapter itself. So this week is work ethic. So I'm gonna read the overview directly, and that's sort of like where we can build our foundation from. So we spent the last few episodes building a sequence. Grit asks, can you endure this? Patience asks, can you trust this? Adaptability asks, with new information, does this still make sense? And today we arrive at the virtue that sits beneath all three, the one that powers them, the one that makes them real rather than theoretical, work ethic. This virtue can be somewhat contentious, so I want to be careful. In many ways, we've turned work ethic into something it was never supposed to be. We celebrate the grind. We glorify the 14-hour day. We wear exhaustion as a badge of honor and treat busyness as proof that we are doing something meaningful. Social media is full of people filming themselves at 4 a.m, telling you that the reason you are not successful is that you are not working hard enough. And some of that is true, but most of it is incomplete. Because hard work aimed at the wrong thing is just expensive movement. And hard work that never includes investment in yourself is just a slow way to empty the cup. That is the tension this chapter sits inside. Work ethic is essential. There is no version of this framework that works without it. You can have perfect clarity, deep courage, beautiful humility, and the patience of a saint. But if you do not do the work day after day, when no one is watching and no one is clapping, those virtues stay on the shelf. They remain ideas you agree with rather than qualities you embody. But here's the part that most people miss. Work ethic is not just about output. It is about where you aim the effort. There's a difference between pouring everything into external production and strategically investing some of that effort into yourself, your fitness, your emotional regulation, your relationships, your mind, the things that expand your capacity so that when you do pour outward, you are pouring from abundance rather than depletion. I learned this the hard way. There was a period of my life where I worked harder than I thought a person could work. I was rebuilding from an injury, raising a family, building a business, and training as a firefighter. And for a long time, the extreme output was necessary. It was what the season demanded. But there came a point where the same work ethic that had saved me was breaking me. I was pouring from an empty cup and calling it discipline. An executive coach gave me a metaphor that changed how I understood effort. He said, imagine you're a cup. Every day you pour into the things that demand your resources, your business, your family, your responsibilities. If you only ever pour out, you reach the bottom. And then you're giving from nothing. You are running on fumes and calling it strength. The shift is not working less. It's directing some of that work ethic inward, toward the foundation, toward becoming a more capable person, so that when you return to the demands, you have more to give, not less. There is also a generational tension in how we think about work ethic that I want to explore. The older generation built their success on grinding hours, decades of sacrifice. They are right to take pride in that. But many of them never invested those hours in themselves, and they hit a ceiling they cannot see. The younger generation understands self-investment. They talk about balance and boundaries, but too often they want to optimize before they have earned the right to optimize. You cannot reduce to 10 hours what you have never done for 14. The foundation has to be built first. The truth is both generations are right at different times for different things. You have to grind first. You have to build the skills, earn the credibility, pay the price of the early years. But then you have to try and learn to aim the grind, to make the effort strategic rather than just relentless. Hours in the chair is not the only form of work ethic. Reading 2 hours a day from books relevant to your aim is a form of work ethic that does not show up on the quarterly bottom line, but it will show up over time in ways you cannot imagine. I tell a story in this chapter about two friends from my soccer team growing up, Chris and Alex. They went on to find remarkable success in the music industry. I watched them perform on a nearly empty stage and at an event that I organized in my early 20s. The number of people that showed up was underwhelming, to say the least. The conditions were far from ideal. They did this to help me raise money for a nonprofit I was working for out of the goodness of their heart. Despite the underwhelming nature of the audience and those actually on the dance floor, they performed with an energy that matched a sold-out arena. Maybe 15 years later, I saw them perform 2 more times personally, and at a distance on stages like Tomorrowland. The effort was exactly the same. It did not matter whether the room was empty or full, whether they were hungry to break into the music industry or already found success. The standard never changed. That is work ethic. Not the volume of effort, the consistency and integrity of it. That is what this episode is about. Not work ethic as grinding hours, work ethic as the disciplined, intentional investment of effort into both what you build and who you are building. Pouring from abundance rather than depletion. Showing up with the same standard, whether the room is full or empty. And understanding that effort does not guarantee outcomes, but it always guarantees growth.
One of the things that I liked the most about that intro was that you were framing what you believe work ethic to be within the framework, which I think is at odds with maybe the general understanding, at least as far as I've heard it in the spaces I've found myself. You very often hear that work ethic simply means to grind.
Yeah.
And you and I both know that time in, as you said, it's the quality of the time that you're spending on the thing, not the volume of time. And while the volume, certainly will compound over time and get you results, it's not optimal. Did you ever feel that way? That work ethic was more of a grind than like a quality grind? When did that switch flip for you?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know the exact moment that it flipped, or I started to realize how to be more strategic about it. But in the intro, I gave an example of a period of my life where I was grinding. It was very clear that it was necessary. It lasted a significant period of time. And in retrospect, I spent most of my life, I think, putting a lot of work ethic towards any endeavor. But it wasn't until I started working with a coach that I really started to understand the metaphor that was used in the intro, which is that, there's something about pouring from abundance rather than depletion. And at some point, I needed to realize that there's there's a lot of people that are now depending on me. I have a family, a business, I have responsibilities, commitments, and in order for me to show up as the best version of myself in all of those areas, it does require me to put some of that work ethic that I was providing all of those areas of my life to myself. And so that looks, in part different for different people. That's the intentional application of like nutritional decisions in your life, which is fuel for your body and your mind. It's, health, wellness, fitness, which allows you to have more energy and strength while you're showing up into those spaces. It's the intentional internal work, which is really what transferable everything is all about. It's about looking inward, looking in the mirror, and doing work, finding the things that, about yourself that you might not be the happiest with, and applying effort towards improving in those areas. So every time you show up into all those different domains, they're getting each time an improved version of yourself. And once I really understood that, it stopped feeling like I was being selfish. As a parent, for example, that's something that parents often struggle with, is if they're putting time into themselves, it feels like they're taking away from something else. In the case of, like, say, their children, even if it's for an hour to do an exercise or, to meal prep or something. And I think it's for good reason. There's like this instinctual thing inside of us that urges parents to pour their time and energy into their kids. However, we have to think clearly about where those urges come from. Do they make sense? Maybe they did at one point. They no longer do. As your kids get a little bit older, they become a little more independent. And so maybe you can take some of that time back. When they're babies, maybe you can't find that same time. And so that's where, when we spoke last time about adaptability and stuff, it's understanding what's required in the different seasons. And work ethic gets applied to each of those. But I think, to your point, is we always see work ethic solely as, either the application of it's the application of work outward.
Right.
It's very rarely inward. But the reality is, it's not selfish to put work into yourself.
Right.
It can be selfless to improve yourself in a variety of ways so that you can show up in that as that improved version. And that's ultimately selfless because you have more to give.
Sure.
Of yourself. And it's a hard thing to wrap your mind around. And it's something I would challenge every person listening is to, reflect on that at least. You don't have to sort of like say, okay, I'm just going to, blindly take the lesson. And that's true of everything I think we talk about is like, just think about it.
Yeah.
Reflect on it and how it might show up in your life.
When I think of work ethic and how I was taught it, or how people tried to teach me work ethic or lead by example, I always pull back to my school experience, where I don't think I had it so much in elementary school, but certainly when I was in post-secondary, I was not a good student in that I wasn't really, my work ethic was very poor as far as the work that I was doing there. And what I'm getting at here is that I didn't have it in the frame of mind that any of the work that I was doing was for me or benefiting me in any way. As I've matured and like moved into more professional spaces, I'm able to see that my efforts do have a direct impact on the results that I get. And that's something that drives me to work harder on those things. Where I don't necessarily know that I had that notion in my mind when I was a young person. So any of the things that I did, whether it was school or athletics or what have you, sure, I was working, but I don't think I ever framed it in the way that I was working for myself. it's always for somebody else. I'm doing this for teachers. I'm doing this for my parents. On the field, I'm doing this for my teammates. Even some of the first jobs that I had, it was never in my mind that, I'm working hard because I have to, but I'm working for somebody else. The only thing I'm getting out of this is exchange. Where with maturity, you realize how much you're actually getting out of those experiences, or at least for me. I don't want to speak broadly for everybody. But effectively, that's where I've landed, is that my work ethic went through the roof once I realized how much self-development I can get out of it if I'm being intentional in how I work on those things. I like that you spoke to how we can break down work ethic, the things that inform it, whether it's effort or capacity or volume. Certainly, my work ethic, or how I view it, I guess, it does have deadlines in mind. There are some scenarios where you have a deadline and you need a deadline because it's been imposed by somebody else, or you've imposed it yourself. But so I'm kind of like rambling here. I feel like I had a really good point. I'm just having a hard time landing on it.
No, that's okay.
Ultimately, what I think I'm trying to say is that I understand that time in the chair, while necessary to get larger things done, doesn't equate to work ethic if the quality of the work you're producing is poor or the capacity for that work that you have is poor. So like, for instance, we've spoken before about how an individual can spend 12 hours in a chair where maybe something I'm really good at only needs 3 hours from me. That doesn't mean I have a worse work ethic. After I finished that and vetted the quality and I was able to move on to something else, maybe it's the capacity to then have the energy to move on to that next thing. I don't know.
Yeah, I think there's a lot there, and you bring up a really good point. It's something that a lot of business leaders struggle with, and I think a lot of people professionally, we mix up a little bit, where, and there's probably good reason, if we consider like historical precedents in terms of like, time in the field farming, like you're probably working while you're in the field.
Right.
Time is necessary. And so your ability to have a larger amount of time as like a quantifiable output means, that was necessary. Your work ethic there created results downstream from it.
Sure.
Then, we move to say like line work in industrial plants and stuff like that. You're mechanically doing something. So like the longer you can stay on the line was something that we'd probably praise or incentivize. But as the world has changed, I think we're always late in evolving and changing our expectations and our understanding. And so even in the professional world, time in the chair, we're obviously talking about, say, like an administrative sense.
Yeah.
Time in the chair does not equate entirely. It doesn't tell the whole story, right?
No.
So like, to your analogy, if someone sat in the chair for 12 hours to do something that could take you 3, well, if it's their first time, that's great. They showed commitment and their willingness to do the thing for the first time. It's going to take 12 hours. But the thing that is the most meaningful is every time they do that task after, can they get it down to 3?
Sure.
But I think we often mistake that, and we miss that as sort of like an incentive or a value that we try and quantify more broadly, obviously.
Right.
And it's of course in business terms, it's the leadership's responsibility to help either incentivize those or make it known that these are like the expectations. These are the things we're looking for, whether it's by a formal KPI or just culturally. But it's also everyone's, understanding of because we're all judging the people we're working around, to understand that, okay, just because somebody's sitting there, that's the first layer.
Yeah.
Like, good on them if they're getting the task done. That is great. However, we also need the other part of it. And the thing that we should look for the most is who's able to take that 12-hour task and get it down to 3.
Yeah.
That's the thing we really want. And that's not just in business. That's also within ourselves. I think about this quite a lot. I look at, how can I continuously find ways in my day to accomplish more than the person beside me? Simple things like going to the grocery store. If I can get in and out of the grocery store in half the time that the people around me or the other people in the grocery store can, and you multiply that over how many trips to the grocery store in my life I'm going to have, I just gained that time back, and I can do something productive with it. The same thing would be true for, like, how long do I need to take in the shower? If you were to look at a day, not just work, but our own day, like the amount of time we have. Interestingly enough, this is something that was actually really, really powerful in the military, and like something as simple as basic training that you kind of learn is like the value of a minute. Kind of teach you, oh, you can get a lot done in 1 single minute.
Sure.
And they're pushing you towards that, but it sort of reframes and changes your understanding. And when I apply that to my life, the amount of time I have, we all only have 24 hours in a day. That's equal to all of us. The thing that makes it different for all of us is how efficient we can be and how much work ethic we can apply to all of the things we do. And that might sound a little stressful as well, because like I don't want to apply stress of like moving fast through the grocery store and all of that kind of stuff. But it doesn't actually have to be that. Maybe for a period of time, you intentionally apply work ethic to find a more efficient way to move through the grocery store. And then after, that becomes your default. So it's not actually work ethic applied. You've just found the efficiency. And so for the rest of your life, now you can apply this level of efficiency rather than it be this intentional application of the virtue over time. And so, again, if you were to break that down in a day between shower, grocery store, not just your professional life, reading, if that's a part of your self-development, going to the gym, how fast can you, do your workout, get in and out. So for example, for me as a parent, that's the value of circuits has been huge. Like if I only have 40 minutes, I can still get an exhaustive 40 minutes in. That's better than nothing. And it's better than if, I'm taking 2 minutes between each set.
Right.
Despite what's more beneficial or not, it's sort of irrelevant. It's sort of like, what's the output I can get within that time?
Yeah, I think it is important that we draw a distinction between performance and work ethic.
Yes.
In that some of the examples you gave, clearly you're optimizing everything.
Yes.
To perform at a high level.
Yeah.
But not everybody's going to have the capacity or the know-how to do stuff like that. And to be fair, I like a long shower as well. That's more important to me than the time that I'm saving to do other things.
Sure.
And that there's going to be tons of nuance and fluctuation depending on the individual. And I think it always comes back to what your goals are. So do you need the extra time? Then yes, you need to optimize because you need that time back. Someone in your position obviously needs as much time back as they can get. Where, my time in the hot tub, sacred.
Yeah, I think you bring up a really good point, which is everyone has to decide for themselves. Mm-hmm. Everything has trade-offs, right? There are, as Thomas Sowell says, there are no solutions, only trade-offs, which, I completely agree with. And you're right to distinguish the difference between performance and the work ethic. I think what I was trying to get at is that you don't always have to just apply work ethic. You can apply work ethic towards performance, and then that performance can create a standard.
Sure.
So you create an outcome that's desirable, but it does begin with work ethic and intentionality of like, okay, I want to improve in this area. And so I think that's a really good point. So if we return to circle back to decision making, there's a part where, and I said this in the introduction, early on in your life, we have to consider developing skills that are going to be of service to us into the future, especially if we're thinking professionally. And there's a level of work ethic that's going to have to go into that. And that's sort of like what maybe I was describing as the older generation sees as work ethic, that bit of a grind. And, you know, you're young, you have energy.
Laced up, head down.
That's right.
Get to work.
Get to work. Not for the sake of work itself. To be honest, it's mostly about learning. Learning about building skills about yourself, and you know, learning what it might take to get to a new level. The upside is you can learn a lot of those things through sport. And you know, any young person who grows up trying to improve in athletics or in the arts or anything, like if you set an objective and you work hard, tirelessly towards that, then you understand those principles. And I would argue that by the time you get into the professional world, you have a really good understanding of what it takes. And if you think about it, if you reflect on it, you go into the professional world looking back on your time in athletics or the arts or whatever the case may be, and you say, okay, well, just as I wanted to become a better soccer player, it took effort, it took a lot of work ethic and intention. Okay, here's the new soccer in my life. It's my job, whatever that job may be. And so you apply work ethic. And then you find improvement. And then you get better and better and better. And because we're constantly in a state of reevaluating, over time, where you apply that work ethic should likely change. And in the scenario I described, for me, it was getting the work done, getting the job done, impart time in the chair, doing work, and learning as fast as possible. And then it got to a point where in business, leaders often become bottlenecks in their organizations. And then so, you know, if you actually peel back the layers, what's the reason for that? Could be identity. It could be insecurity, where they want to feel important. It could be a variety of things. But you start to put some of that work ethic into the self-development as a leader, and the actual output performance of your organization starts to increase. But if you continue to put the work ethic only in sitting in the chair, doing the thing, you continue to be the bottleneck. You become the constraint.
Right.
And so that's where that shift should be, in looking inward, getting out of your own way.
Yeah. You often hear people talking about how, especially in like business settings or like people who are in the hustle culture and so forth, like wearing that gold badge of being the hardest worker in the room. But like, what does that actually mean? Clearly, there's not an alignment with between most people on what it actually means to be the hardest worker.
Yeah. It's interesting because you might see somebody that posts, as the example, like they're up at 4:00 in the morning. They're getting after it.
Right.
What they fail to mention is that they went to bed at 8:00 at night.
Yeah.
And so,
like, we're on the same clock.
Yeah. It's just different buffer time.
Sure.
So the thing isn't actually the time. It's not when you wake up. It continues to go back to the same thing I was saying, which is like, what are you doing with the time? Now, the people who are waking up at 4 are saying, well, when you wake up early, you're putting that time into, you know, exercise, preparing for the day, you know, the extravagant morning routines and all of that kind of stuff. Whereas those people that go to bed late at night, it's because they're playing video games, Netflix, doom scrolling.
It's usually because I take my pre-workout at 7 p.m.
Right. and so it's sort of like intellectually lazy to just assume that someone goes to bed late, they're not hustling or they're not putting work ethic and
Sure.
effort
I mean, I'm
towards
sure
something.
you've had countless nights behind the keyboard.
100%. And now I think being the hardest worker in the room idea, it's also not sustainable. I use this example of when I was in the military, we had our CO for the regiment, and I remember going to work and seeing his car there, and I remember leaving, seeing his car there, and I remember thinking, "Wow, that guy works. Like he's really leading from the front." Fast forward later into life, and I'm in a leadership position. My understanding was that's what was required. And to a degree, that is true. What I later realized was that those positions typically last for two years. And there's probably a reason for that. It's not sustainable to work at that tempo, that cadence
Right.
for 5, 10,
Yeah, especially
15
in
years.
high stakes environments. You need to be sharp all the time.
That's right. That's right. And so at some point you have diminishing returns. And more importantly, unless your objective is to pour your entire life into your profession, if it's building a business or, innovating, whatever the case may be, then hey, all the power to you. Pour all of your work ethic into that. I tip my hat to you. That's great. But for the average person, they want a family. Well, if you neglect your family, if you don't give them any of that work ethic that you give the professional side of you, then how long are you going to be able to have a family? What are you going to be able to actually give your kids? Maybe wealth because you put all your time and attention into your profession. Okay, wealth without, a present parent, like teaching skills and virtues, it's almost meaningless. I've said this before, but and I would argue it is the greatest wealth, or the greatest form of wealth you could give your children is character, virtues, all the things we're talking about. And that takes time. That takes intention, takes presence, leading by example, and all of those things. Now, just to kind of keep it on the topic of parents, I also want to note, because this is where I think some of the parents in sort of like our generation can confuse that a little bit, is like the desire for hyperpresence, almost as like the pendulum swinging the opposite of what they felt they received from their parents in many cases. But there's a bit of a cautionary tale there too, which is that if you're hyper present and you're not really putting work ethic towards something, if you're not demonstrating to your children the necessary sacrifices to go out and to work towards something, which means you have to be out of the house or you're locked in your office in your house, if that's the case, and so the sacrifice is your presence, then they're not going to understand what it takes. And as they're growing, you're going to tell them, hey, you have to work towards the things you want, but you've never showed it to them. And so I think that's where the intentionality and seasons come into play. Understand, okay, and the more you can articulate this by understanding it within yourself, where you can sit down with your kids and be like, look, mommy, daddy, we're trying to get a promotion at work, and this is how it's going to help our family. This is how it's going to impact them. And over the next 6 months, in order for me to achieve that, I have to do X. So I'm going to be out of the house more than I would like to. I would rather be here with you, but this is going to help us. And now they're going to see you doing the thing. And then hopefully you succeed and they get to see the outcome. They were a participant in that because they helped with the sacrifice and they saw the outcome. You just gave them one of the most beautiful gifts you could possibly give them through your work ethic. And all you applied was intentionality and articulation around that, and you shared that with them.
Yeah. It's funny though, and I'm only speaking from my case because that's all I can speak to. is my parents both worked a ton. They both professional individuals. They worked downtown. They would train to and from every day. And I saw them enough, but like certainly like it's not like they were home at 3:30 or picking me up from school. I didn't see them until it was dark outside, almost every day. Tremendous hard workers. And I was not. It's funny that it's not something that I learned from them. You know, like it didn't, even though I knew that they were working hard to afford all of the things that I had, and I grew up like fairly privileged with on the backs of their hard work. It didn't really rub off, I don't think, in the way you're describing. And it kind of leads me into something that I wanted to discuss because I think it applies particularly to my school situation, but also to sports and other people, which is the difference between work ethic and talent, and allowing your maybe baseline capacities that are high in any given domain allow you to maybe think you're applying work ethic, but you're not really. That's what I mean to say, like in reflecting about it. I obviously did work, but it wasn't performance-minded because I was able to get away without having to apply a high level of work in academics to get passable or even in some cases good results. And it wasn't until stakes were raised a little bit that I realized the importance of effort.
Sure. Well, I think that's probably something that you were just like fortunate to experience. And, you know, I think for some, like say, I'll use athletics because it's what I understand the most. If you're playing a sport like soccer and, you know, you're good at it and you're enjoying it, and you don't feel like you're applying a lot of work ethic towards it, it could be because you're not yet, like in your development journey, you're not at a place where it's gonna push you, right? Because you're able to get by, but eventually it will show up. It will show up. That's like, okay, if you want to get to this next level, if you want to get here, then you have to apply work ethic. So I would say, like in your scenario, if you know you got by because of your talent, right? Let's say you're getting your average is 85. You're like, well, that's great. Those are good marks. However, if you did set for yourself, I want 98s across the board. It doesn't matter how talented you are. You set a new level and a new stage, and you're gonna have to apply a new level of work ethic to achieve a new and greater outcome.
Sure.
And so I think that's an interesting distinction because, you know, basically what it might highlight is like, you know, how much effort are you putting towards something? And are you just sort of skating by?
Sure. I mean, we've also spoken about how you are graded on things and the scale on which you're measured. And perhaps at the time I didn't care about the number because I thought it was arbitrary. And then there was, like, what are the forces driving me to want to work towards something? Certainly in elementary school and high school, I couldn't even tell you now why I would have wanted to work hard back then. Certainly with an adult lens, I can see the value in it. But at the time, I was like my grades say I'm average or above, and like I'm learning things, and that's enough. Like I don't need to get 100% on this.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, and that's kind of one of the things I struggled with. Now, I didn't do well in school by any means, but you know, to be fair, based on the effort that I put in, I probably got pretty good marks. But they're definitely not. You know, I'm a 60s student.
Sure.
And certainly in part it's effort. And I think I didn't see the value of getting 90s.
Yeah.
Or even 80s or 70s. Like I didn't understand it.
I liked the things that I was interested in, and beyond that, there wasn't much in as far as the way of goals go, outside of like, oh, I'm going to disappoint my parents if I don't do well enough. But then it pulls back to the selfish element we were talking about. I was doing it for other people.
Yeah.
And so if I was conscious about how it was going to be impacting me in my future, probably would have worked a little harder. And I'm sure probably all or most of my teachers and my parents were telling me that, and it just didn't stick.
Yeah, same. Every parent-teacher interview is that. Is Daniel does not fulfill his potential. And that's true. I know that. I don't think I would have been the smartest kid in the room by any stretch. But could I have done better? Absolutely. Without question. Now, in terms of work ethic, and I talked about like the cup, and if we just think about it not as the totality of an individual's resources, but solely as work ethic, at the time, as I'm growing up, I have soccer. My dream is to become a professional soccer player. I have things going on in my life that require a lot of effort, beyond school and the soccer field. And, whenever I had time, I applied work ethic that I had available as a resource, however much that was in that cup, and I applied it to the things I was interested in. And that wasn't one of them. And so, I think there's right or wrong, there's a tension there. And that's probably true for a lot of younger people. What I did realize was that, one, it's never too late to go back and keep learning. There's nothing wrong with that. Once your life has changed. And so in retrospect, the fact that I poured all of my work ethic resource into my pursuit of becoming a professional soccer player, I think still was probably the right thing to do. Whatever I missed in school, like there's an expiration. If I didn't make it by the time I was like 21, let's say, the opportunity is kind of off the table for the most part. And so
there's always curling.
Yeah, right. That definitely wouldn't pique my interest.
Yeah, and sorry to cut you off there, but
okay.
it's funny that you say that, piquing your interest, because something I'd written down is when you're doing something you really enjoy, like, sure, it's work, like you're working towards something, however you want to like play with the language, but sometimes work ethic doesn't feel like work when you enjoy the thing that you're doing. I just wanted to bring that to the table.
Yeah, I think you're totally right, and that's kind of a sweet spot. If you can find that thing, then that is like you've struck gold. I think. I don't. It's not the conditions, unfortunately. I remember growing up hearing a lot of people like, find the thing you love to do and you'll never work a day in your life.
Yeah.
Right. It's a cliche, and there's some people that can, a very small percentage of people that can find that thing, and that's great for them. Unfortunately, that's not.
Sure.
It's not true for everybody.
Like hopefully you can find things within that thing that you enjoy.
Sure. Yeah. I think part of it too is, I hear more and more people talk about this, but it's, also find the things that you're good at. Even if you don't immediately enjoy it. I think Scott Galloway talks about this. It's nice to do things that you're good at.
Yeah.
And you'll probably start enjoying it because, if you're good at doing something, you're going to elevate within it. People are going to look to you. You're going to receive accolades towards that thing. It's probably going to feel good. So if you're kind of unsure as to like, well, I don't really know, it's like, fine, go just find the thing that you're good at. Put yourself in a position to do work on things that accentuate your skill sets instead of, going to whatever is available or optimizing solely for, whatever the hourly rate is. Go find something you're great at and you'll accelerate through it rather than sort of, to your point is like, you have to grind and apply a lot of work ethic to do something in 8 hours you hate.
Right.
And so if you find something you're good at and you work 8 hours and it doesn't really feel like a lot, it doesn't deplete from that cup of work ethic, well, now you maybe can apply that to something else, a hobby, a side hustle, something else to elevate or push you in a direction that you would like to go.
Yeah, I look at the jobs that I've had, the tasks within those jobs, and then even I jump from hobby to hobby quite a bit because I get really interested and hyper focused on a thing. And there's always a question that pops up, which is, do I want to be better at this thing? And if the answer is yes, then work ethic is deployed like crazy. And I think that probably would hold true for most people.
Yeah, I think so too. And it's just a matter of finding the thing that they want to do and learning how to kind of decipher that.
Sure. And I mean, there are work scenarios where you're not going to have that opportunity. I worked a warehouse job for a number of years. I hustled, but like I was picking shoes off of racks, putting them down, dropping them off. I did it part-time for 3 years during university. I could only get so good at that job. There's only so much effort that I could push towards that because there was kind of nowhere else to go. And I knew that, and so I wasn't deploying tons of resources to get any better than I was. It was good enough that I was getting a paycheck, but I didn't want to be the best warehouse picker on the planet. That wasn't important to me.
Sure. Now, this kind of goes back to what I was saying before, is like, the first couple of weeks while you were learning the job, you probably had to apply a disproportionate amount of work ethic to learn, understand, and ramp up to whatever you felt was sufficient.
Sure. And like you slowly pick up certain habits that make you more efficient over time. You get better at it on top of simply just being like, no, I'm going to speed walk anytime I'm going to and from a location. It could also be sequencing. So I've learned if I do it in this order, things are going to go better for me.
Yeah, exactly. And that kind of is what I was trying to describe for, like, say, the grocery store or whatever, is like intentionally in finding ways, like you're ramping up a job, to find levels of efficiency with intention. And, I don't know too many people that have strategized how to be hyper efficient in their grocery shopping.
Right.
It's not a crazy amount of output. You've been doing it for so long. You apply a little bit of work ethic towards that, think intentionally about it. And after a few practice runs, after a while, you're in and you're out, and you've got a little bit more time back into your day. Mm-hmm. And over time, that time applied to a separate goal, whether it's, self-care in the hot tub. Now you just got 20 minutes back twice a week to go in the hot tub and spend more time if you couldn't previously because, of kids in your profession or whatever. You're just creating time for more things that can hopefully circle back to serving you. And that's something that when you become a parent too, you have to figure out. Like, so much of parenting in the early stages is about restructuring your life to make everything work, because it's all changed and upside down.
Yeah, it's a trial by fire in time management.
Absolutely. And you get to figure out, and you find out what works, and you have to do it intentionally. So if you don't have kids yet, you can apply the same principles, right? And do the same thing. After your first child, you thought, like, okay, wow, that was tough. We figured it out. Once you have number two, especially if they're close together, we had 2 under 2. That's tough, because it was hard because it's your first child to figure out, like, okay, how are we going to make this work? But at least there's 2 parents to 1 child.
Yeah.
So you figure out how to work collaboratively and all of that kind of stuff. Then once you have the second, you go through the same process, but it's like, okay, well, it's kind of 1-to-1 now. And so it all changes. And that's a huge culture shock.
Sure.
But yeah, it's principally the same thing. And that's just figuring out and what's going to work for you. What are the outcomes you want? And then applying the effort towards that.
Sure.
To be fair, maybe the name of the chapter shouldn't be work ethic. Maybe it should just be effort. It's just a little more broad.
Sure.
Like putting effort towards whatever the objective is in of itself. I think also something I wanted to touch on, this kind of ties back to, I'll use a parenting example and having your first child and or just children in general, is there is a reality of work ethic being required in order to likely be the parent that you would like to be. And there's an increased amount of work that's required of you. Now, the upside is you love your children, So it's easier than you would likely imagine. I think for people without kids, it's probably harder to imagine because you're like, how could I possibly find the time? That's going to be so much work and so much effort. But to your point, it is different when it's for something or someone you love so deeply. And the love for a child is like nothing you can imagine. It's like there's a layer above what you thought love was that you just didn't know existed.
I'm incomplete without it.
Yeah, it's like, oh, I thought I understood love, but there's more. And so I think that helps serve you. But no matter what, there's a level of increase in work ethic, especially over a period of time until they can become more self-sufficient. And, that's okay. So for me, I'll use my example. I helped my wife do nighttime feeds. So for the first, I guess, 3 years, I helped with nighttime feeds for our oldest, including when we had our second. And so that meant I had to wake up through the night, help with the feed, but I still had a profession. I still wanted to try and somewhat keep fit. I couldn't, of course, to the same degree, and so there's a trade-off there. But it was really, really hard to have broken sleep every single night and then show up to work, try and perform, and all of that. Like, there's no other way around it. I had to dig deep and really, really work intentionally to create an outcome.
Right.
And then it subsides and you don't have to apply the same things. Nighttime feeds stop, diapers stop. Like, it's a seasonal component of parenting. I think everything is like that. And so you don't have to apply the same amount of work ethic, but you also become more proficient in your parenting style and over time. And so it does become a bit easier. But I guess what I wanted to just say is that, yes, there is the hustle culture and it's largely unnecessary. It's incomplete. It's not true. I've said this a million times. I put everything towards becoming a professional soccer player and I still failed. So you could still do everything right, work ethic included, tons of effort, and still fail. It doesn't guarantee anything.
Yeah.
It just increases probability. But, despite all of that being true about the hustle culture, is you want to get better at something, it's going to require work.
Right.
You want to achieve something, it's going to require work. There's no way around that.
Sure.
So it doesn't have to be professionally, like the hustle culture, or it doesn't have to be nutrition, wellness, building, a physique or something. Either way, whatever you decide, just know it's going to require work.
Sure. Yeah, there's two things in there that I think I identified. I'm going to go, one of them is about want. So, of course, if you want something, you have to do things to get that thing. And it depends on how badly you want that thing. I want to pull back to your parenting example, the nighttime feeds. And I'm going to use the big R word, responsibility. In that, when you have a little potato of a child that is not self-sufficient, can't take care of themselves at all, if we remove everything from the equation, you're still responsible for that life. And so I don't know if it was solely work ethic there among all of the other things, but you internalize that responsibility. I helped bring them into the world. I'm responsible to take care of them, and that is why I'm applying this level of work and effort and time management and so forth. I think that responsibility can get pulled into anything that you're doing. It's just a matter of frame. So I could say, for instance, right now I'm trying to learn how to play chess, trying to get better at it. I really enjoy it. It doesn't feel like effort, but I want to get better at it. Therefore, I have a responsibility to research, to practice, to get the reps in, because I know that those things are required in order to progress and get better. And that responsibility, if you take that, you can apply it to any framework.
Yeah, I think you're right. But I think there's something also within that. And I think often people can come to the conclusion and say, they might say, okay, I want this outcome. They say they want it. They might research. They might research it, read about it, imagine, daydream, they like all of these things, but without actually doing the work, they're not going to, I guess, they're not going to achieve it. And so I think it's interesting that you bring up responsibility. Like, are you then responsible? If you set forth a goal, are you responsible to yourself or the people around you to put the effort towards achieving that goal? Probably. That might be a good way of framing it.
Sure. Well, I mean, otherwise you're just expecting it to be handed to you.
Right. That's sort of like an older generation to younger generation accusation. And obviously we don't really like speaking in broad strokes.
Sure. But I mean, like if I don't want to trip on my shoelaces today, I can either take it upon myself to be a responsible person and tie them, or I cannot. And maybe someone sees me walking down the street and goes, let me tie those shoes for you.
Sure. Now, I think it would be good to add another metaphor into that, because that one's sort of immediate, where you get like the immediate feedback loop. Like, okay, it's quick effort, it's immediate. I know my shoes are tied, I'm good, I can keep moving forward. But I think where it becomes really hard is in the areas where there's not a lot of feedback. We talked about that in some of the other podcast episodes where, you don't have tight feedback mechanisms. The loops aren't tight. You could be putting in work and effort for weeks, months, or even in some cases years to never know whether you're actually going to achieve the thing you want. And I think that contributes to how hard it might be to apply that work ethic. People want to know, like, okay, well, like, I want a raise at work. Okay, so I'm going to work hard for the next 4 weeks, and then I'm going to go ask for it.
Right.
And that's all I have to do. Like max 4 weeks, and that's a long period of time. Some people might think, whereas, is 4 weeks actually a long time? Does that demonstrate?
Sure. Well, I mean, like, there's some calculus that needs to happen when you make the decision to chase after something like that without knowing what the result is going to be. There's a level of risk you assume when you do that.
Yeah.
And like there are levels of responsibility in those things. There's self-imposed sense of responsibility because you want a thing and you're taking ownership over that. There's also, my boss has assigned me this task. I am formally responsible for it. And so I'm held to that by external forces. I might have taken the point in a different direction. So I apologize for that, but.
No, I think I guess what I'm ultimately getting at is sometimes it takes longer than you think, and sometimes it's not about in the time frame that you want. You're sort of in lots of cases. We've talked about this before. Like there's the things you can control and the things you cannot control.
Yeah.
The only thing you can do is focus on the things you can control. Your effort is one of them.
Sure.
The work ethic is one of them. So yeah, you can't control whether you're going to get that raise in 4 weeks, 6 weeks, or at the end of the year. But you can control how much effort you put in your current job.
Yeah, and I think I'm saying the same thing, which is that if you want an outcome, you have a responsibility to put some form of effort towards getting it. That's one variable you have complete control over.
Yeah.
If in the example you've given, I want to go ask for a raise. Maybe I'm not going to get one. But if I bust my ass for those 4 weeks, the likelihood is maybe higher than if I did nothing at all. So I'm taking responsibility for how I'm perceived, for what I'm capable of producing, the quality of what I produce, as opposed to relinquishing any control that I may have over that outcome.
Yeah, absolutely. I could tie it back to my own example in soccer. And again, I've said this a million times about, trying my best and not making it. But last week I had Jamie Peters on, and in speaking to him, it was one of the things that was kind of most interesting about that is, obviously I know he worked tremendously hard to achieve what he did, and he succeeded, and he deserved that, and he deserves all the accolades that come from that. I also tried really, really hard. I put a lot of effort, and I didn't succeed. However, had I not put forth that effort, I for sure would not have succeeded.
Yeah.
And that's where the probability exists. You don't guarantee the outcome. You just increase the probability. And, the same thing is true for him. Like, his ability to find success was at least in part conditional on the effort he put towards trying to find that success.
Yeah.
All of the other things, the variables and the uncontrollables, in his scenario worked. Mine, it didn't. Whether it's because I truly wasn't good enough, other reasons, who knows? For him, he was clearly more than good enough. He had an incredible career, and the conditions worked sufficiently. And also, he did share on that podcast that despite having made it, there were still conditions not within his favor that altered the course of his career and determining the club that he chose to sign with versus another.
Yeah.
So even within the framework of success, there were still conditions beyond his control.
Sure. I mean, if work ethic was the only variable for success, everybody could be successful.
Yeah.
We know that's not possible.
Yeah, and I think that's the hard part, and that's why sometimes people can be cynical about it. And taunting the hustle culture and things like that. And I think in some ways, some people need to work more. I've actually heard Chris Williamson talk about this, where he said, like, no one cares about the person who needs to work less. They need, within their paradigm of like personal development, they need to figure out how to do less. And no one cares about that person. They think, oh, poor me, I work too hard.
Sure.
But that is true for some people. And I think
it's task dependent as well.
Yeah.
It's super heavy cognitive work. Like, what's the difference between 8 hours and 12 hours? At a certain point, you might get burnt out and not have the energy to be as sharp as you could be to give that task the respect that it deserves. Where if it's mundane, monotonous stuff and there's just a lot of it and it has to be done, but you're not going to make any mistakes by being tired, then sure, you could work 12, 14 hours to do that.
Yeah, I think creatives and athletes really understand this. I can speak from the athletic world, at least, where we understand that there's a point of diminishing returns. If you have a team and you train them, 6 hours a day, 2-hour training sessions 3 times a day in the build up to the game, the performance you're going to get in that match on Saturday or Sunday is going to be so far from the output that you want. And so there's also the fact of like optimizing what you're trying to achieve and applying the resources that you're going to need for that thing. I think creatives do the same thing. I know, like, in the book writing process, it's not about the hours that I sat down or even consecutively. There is intentionality about, okay, can I create space in my life where when I have the level of inspiration I feel I need to start writing, I can carve out some of that time,
right,
whenever that may be. That mattered more than saying, okay, I can block, 1 hour per day in my calendar at this time. I could show up, and I tried that. I could show up at that time ready to start writing. My mind's blank.
Sure.
And so, okay, well, there's no point in me sitting there attempting to write it.
Right.
I may as well use that hour for something more productive that's not going to require that same cognitive power or creative thinking that I need in that hour.
Yeah.
And then, some other time, all of a sudden, some inspiration comes in, and I think, okay, I actually have something here. Can I carve out an hour randomly?
Yeah.
And creating a bit more of a flexible space where I could do that was actually far more meaningful than just the time in of itself.
Yeah, there's also, to add a bit of nuance, there's a couple of things happening there where if you treat the task as a craft, and you're a crafts person and you have the discipline to do that thing, out of necessity, sometimes you are going to have to carve out that 1 hour and only use that hour to write. And it may not be the best product, but it's something you can come back to.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point.
But you're afforded the time, I guess, to iterate and polish and create that product.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it was like at different points in the writing journey. Like once I got to a point of like editing where I'm just like rereading through, it was a lot easier to to say, okay, this 1 hour per day at this time, I can do that. It's
Right.
a lot easier. When it was a complete blank page, I really, really struggled to just show up and be like, okay, now we write, Daniel. It just, and maybe there's more I could do to kind of troubleshoot that.
Did you ever
Potential.
have moments where like you set aside an hour for yourself and that ended up being limiting because like you hit a spark of inspiration during that 1 hour and had to shut yourself down?
Lots of
Yeah.
times, lots of times. And that's actually a really good point. That was also one of the realizations I had where like I needed to create more of the conditions in my life where if I'm on a roll, I got to keep going. I needed the conditions. So like if I'm on a roll and I'm really happy with my output, then I need to be able to keep going. And so that's not always easy and it's not always perfect, but I had to put effort towards creating those conditions nonetheless. And that was something that helped change things for me. But I mean, at the same time too, one of the ways where I was able to eventually, not at the beginning when I started writing, because when I started writing, I didn't have the same resources. I started writing before AI was really beneficial. It really helped me in the creative process. If I showed up and I had a blank page in front of me, I could go in and say, okay, I'm working on this chapter. This is what I want to write about. Here's a little story from my life. Can you help me figure out like what are some things I want to do? This is what I want to achieve. This is the outcome I would like. And then it would sort of like reverse prompt me. AI was prompting me in a way that really helped the creative process. So there's also resources to utilize and stuff, but it takes time and it takes, circle back to patience. That was something I struggled with in the process.
Sure.
Because every time I showed up for an hour and I accomplished nothing, I just felt like a failure. The part is managing my expectations. It doesn't mean that I was a failure in that moment, even though I didn't achieve what I set out to achieve.
I'm curious, if you had to distill the idea of work ethic down to its simplest thing, what do you think that is?
Effort towards an outcome.
Yeah. Even simpler. Could it just be momentum, effort, call to action?
I think just effort, which I'm genuinely considering changing the chapter from work ethic to effort.
Yeah.
For that reason. I think it's more, I think it's a better way to outline the chapter. The intention behind the chapter
Right on.
is effort. Because to the point of everything we've been discussing, I think we think of work ethic in this like pretty one-dimensional way, but effort is kind of seen as more broad.
Yeah, I definitely think effort is more direct.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's like, I mean, that's really what we mean. If I use the case of Chris and Alex that I tried to use in the introduction.
Yeah.
Right. Alex, who I was fortunate to kind of watch some of their rise to fame as musicians, artists, and, especially seeing the journey early on. And so I shared a brief story where they came in and I was doing a fundraiser for the nonprofit I was working with. And I wanted to do sort of like an education information night and host almost like a concert, like live music event. And so they graciously offered to headline it for me. And unfortunately, I wasn't able to fill the place anywhere close to what I would have liked. Maybe we had, 80 to 100 people, nowhere near filling the venue capacity. And I'll never forget it. What I found so amazing was, despite there being maybe like 10 people of the 80 to 100 that are actually on the dance floor in front of the stage that they're performing on, the energy that they brought, the effort that they put towards their performance was incredible. And, you know, over time, obviously I got to see their rise to fame from a distance and stuff like that. So I could see it on, you know, YouTube clips and stuff like that. Super happy for them. And then I think it was 3 years ago, I got to see them live for the first time since that moment. And there was, I don't know, a couple thousand people. And this is like 15 years after they've found success, right? And, you know, a lot of people think, well, like, will you stop being hungry after a certain point? The effort, the output isn't the same. It was the exact same, as if they were the same sort of like starving artists they were at the beginning, performing for 1,000 people as if there's, you know, 10 people in front of them. And the consistency in that level of effort, I think, is such a beautiful story. Because a lot of people will say, well, like, the condition of my effort, say in the workplace, is based on whether it's the job I want or not. Like, I don't know that it should be that. If you want to become a strong professional, I'm not saying you're going to act the exact same way as if you found your dream job.
Right.
But like, to contrast that between like little to no effort and a healthy amount of effort, I think there's a huge gap between there. And so I would encourage anyone, like, just because it's not your dream job doesn't mean by putting forth effort doesn't mean you can't learn something that might help you in the next job. Doesn't mean you might not be introduced to somebody that's going to advocate for you because they saw how hard you worked. I mean, there's so much baked inside of that. But anyways, I just love that story because I got to see it in real time and in two people that did find success. So it absolutely is part of it, right? If at that little show I did, if they took that attitude where they were like, it's nothing, so they wouldn't get the reps in. They wouldn't get the practice of performing at that level. So they can get mistakes out of the way. They can figure out what works, what doesn't work, all of those things. So when they actually get the opportunity on the biggest stage, it's not their first time giving that level of energy. They've put in the reps. They've put in the work long before that day ever came.
Yeah. It's, you got me thinking about like the hierarchy or the strata of the virtues we've been talking about. And are you classifying effort or work ethic as a virtue? In talking about it in the same way that I believe it was humility that I framed as being a tool, I think that consistent effort applied over time is a great teacher or an opportunity to strengthen some of the other things we've spoken about, like grit, like patience, etc.
Yeah. So one of the things I've struggled with is, like, as of right now, the framework works, you know, as a flow chart, really. But I've been considering having it as like a multi-tiered flow chart, where, like, for example, humility and effort are sort of undercurrents within the framework, supporting each virtue along the way. So instead of having it as presenting it as like a one-dimensional 2D flow chart, honestly, one of the things that I've struggled with is the book hasn't got to the editor yet. And it should have, based on my intentions, like a year ago.
Right.
And so I wonder, you know, one of the things I've struggled with is, like, it's not a living document. I love to iterate. I think we've talked about this before. And writing a book is like, it's almost like once you're done, that's it. And so I've struggled with that. Like, at what point do I just say, okay, the essence is here, and I send it off? Or how much do I keep delaying and iterating? Obviously, of course, it's important to deliver the best product I possibly can. So anyways, I wrestle with that. So I'm curious of your thoughts.
About, like, whether you should just send it in or not.
or like, so you bring up a good point, and I think you're right. I think there's something in there to add or
Yeah.
change within the framework by creating layers. That being said, it's a good example for me of, okay, once we do that, then what's next? What else have we considered
Sure.
to iterate? And
Yeah.
at what point do I say, okay, I've put everything I possibly can, blood, sweat, and tears into this. We've iterated so many times. I'm sending it out. And then, by the time I actually have book in hand, I'm like, oh, we thought of 3 more iterations.
Yeah. Well, that's a good thing in a way, because it means you're still growing, you're still reflecting, and you're still trying to do the material justice.
Yeah.
And think of all the money you'll make off the 2nd and 3rd editions. Just kidding. But yeah, there's been a pretty significant level of thought and care that's gone into everything you've written so far. Without question, you could probably continue to improve upon it until your last breath. It's a labor of love, right? And I think that speaks to how much you care about the material, and wanting this initiative to be successful because you know what kind of impact it'll have. So I can appreciate that. I can also respect the thought that if you're holding on to it forever and it never hits the editor and doesn't hit the books, doesn't hit the shelves, et cetera, then you've been working on it for yourself, not for the people you intend it to be for, which I guess is great. Change starts with you. So that's also a powerful thing in and of itself. You're spending a lot of time thinking about these things, working on yourself so you can teach your children, you can impact your community, you can impact the people at your workplace. You're still living it even if the book isn't on the shelf.
Yes.
It just means that you're limiting your reach in this particular moment for the sake of clarifying and strengthening some of your arguments and your positions, which there's give and take.
Yeah, I think so. And like I said, that's the tension. But I think the way you just described that, I think is very interesting. It's something that I think I have to go back to the book on. I don't know exactly what that looks like or how to structure it within a book,
right?
Which is also hard because it's not, books are words on paper, maybe the odd image. They're less interactive, so you kind of have to find a way to be so descriptive that it feels like you're interacting with it. And so that's always the challenge as well. Whereas like the 2D framework, just flowchart all the way through. So it was a lot easier to build in there. It's a little more prescriptive, I guess. So it adds a layer of complexity. But in this case, I think maybe necessary. So thank you.
Of course. Yeah, I mean, it's working on anything is always going to be continuous. To your point about effort, I think effort is great, but exerting effort just one time doesn't really get you anywhere. It has to be continuous. And so, we're always working on something, putting effort towards something. Yeah, it's interesting.
You said we're always working on something, and I think that's true. What that just actually made me think of, though, is where are we working from? Are we working from a proactive approach or a reactive one?
Yeah, of course.
So, if low-hanging fruit, health and nutrition, it's hard and it requires a lot of effort to commit to whatever health and nutrition plan you've set forth, whatever objective. That's hard to every single morning, evening, whatever your routine is, to stay committed to it. It requires a huge amount of effort, not just in doing it, because it's more things you have to do in your day, but the effort from all of the other virtues and the emotional effort you have to put towards it. That being said, if you don't do that, your life will also be hard. If you find yourself very unhealthy and, maybe out of shape, lacking function in your life, And to live that way is going to require a lot of effort.
Sure.
So I think there's also in that sort of like decision paradigm, looking at where do you want your effort to be, the upfront effort or the downstream effort. And it's not just health and wellness and
Sure.
Physicality. That's also true in many other parts of our life.
Yeah. Just to continue to use the example of health, and it applies to the other things too. Like, you always hear, "Oh, I'm on a diet," or "I'm doing this thing," and that it's implied that that's a temporary measure, which means you're getting temporary results.
Right.
So if you want to improve your health and fitness, it has to be effort that's continually applied. And what that really means is there has to be a fundamental lifestyle change. It becomes the new you. There's baggage that you have to let go of. And that goes for everything that you want to get better at. If you want to become something that is not who you are, even if it means I'm James, the guy who's better at chess, I have to.
Yeah. I think that's why, you'll see like tongue-in-cheek videos on social media from, personal trainers and stuff like that. And whenever I've worked with somebody on the health fitness side, this is true, where, you're the personal trainer, you think you get into it because you're going to work with somebody to teach them how to exercise and to motivate them and so forth. But what you often become is sort of their like pseudo psychologist in helping them work through what is probably, maybe some past traumas that you're the first person they're talking to them about, or, stories they've kind of told themselves. I saw a recent video for somebody that was quite interesting. And she just sort of talked about how she only just recently realized that when she was working out, she was never actually working out to like her max. It was like as soon as it became uncomfortable, then she stopped.
I want to pull it back to the book.
Yeah.
You were talking about iteration. Will it be the final version? Like, why wait to submit it? So I'm going to pull it into an area of that I'm not very familiar with, so I think you're the best person to ask, given Mr. JC around your neck, which is, I don't know really the difference between the Old Testament and the New Testament, the amount of time between those two texts, and if there are significant differences, why are there those significant differences? And so I'm not trying to compare your book to Scripture, of course.
Thank you.
I feel like some people would be upset if I did that. But what I'm getting at is the New Testament just a recontextualization or translation, more or less getting at some of the same principles, but for an audience or a different time?
Yeah. Okay. So I'm gonna butcher this because I'm a lay person when it comes to theology. But to the best of my understanding, is that the Old Testament is basically it's the original teachings from God himself. The New Testament, and this I know to be true, is from Jesus' life forward.
Gotcha.
And so basically the conditions were in the Old Testament, there's all these stories, all of these things happening, and God felt things are not happening the way I intended. I need to send my son to help clarify all of these things that are clearly being misunderstood, to be a source of inspiration. And so that's what the New Testament became.
Gotcha.
It's his life.
So Old Testament's actually pre-Christ?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah. It's largely the Jewish text, the Torah, I believe it is. And so large part of it is that.
Right on. Okay.
And that's where it came from.
what I was basically getting at is, or trying to like draw a comparison where maybe I'm wrong, probably am wrong, but it was that the difference between my generation and 2 generations below me, I have no idea what these kids are talking about. They speak a completely different language. And so even if you submitted the book today, in 20, 30 years, a second edition will be necessary because they're operating with a different set of tools, a different language, and so forth. And I was drawing the comparison to like those religious scriptures, probably coming from a place of misunderstanding, that the New Testament came because of a new context, where people were living in a world where they saw or understood things differently, and there needed to be a retelling of those things in order for it to land the way the text suited the environment of the past.
I totally get what you're saying. I think if I was to draw it back to the religious text, I don't think it required a retelling. It was more of a recontextualization and then I mean, of course, so much of it is about Jesus giving his life for our sins,
right?
And that's what we believe. So like, the Old Testament is like, hey, here's sort of a way to conduct yourself. Here's the 10 Commandments. Don't sin. Don't do these things. And then we did them.
Right.
Pretty consistently.
Still do, baby.
Yes, absolutely. However, the New Testament is the forgiveness of all of those things.
Right on.
And so it's more hope.
Gotcha.
It's like, maybe a good way to look at it is like one end of it is like the stick and the other end is the carrot kind of thing. The Old Testament is a lot harsher.
Yeah, I have not covered it, but I've heard that critique.
Yeah. And where the New Testament is all about hope. And I think that's for good reason. But I totally get the point that you were trying to get, which is that, over time, even if it's not due to, having missed something I felt critically important or anything like that,
sure,
a new version of the book is going to be required.
And maybe like a history textbook was probably a better example to use.
Sure.
I just had I tied it into that because of the whole notion of virtue and so forth. But like, I had textbooks in elementary school that were really old. I'm sure newer versions present the same information just in different language that's more palatable for the audience of today. And just with that said, we've spoken a lot about accessibility and that, there may need to be second, third editions over the years if you want to continue to have this material be accessible to new audiences.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I'll tie it back to the creative side. There's I don't know if you've ever seen this movie. It's with Whoopi Goldberg, Sister Act.
Oh yeah.
Happy day. Nailed it.
Yeah, dude.
So like the premise, I can't remember if it was the first or the second, but at least in part, the premise is like, the churches are empty, and let's bring some spirit and joy back into it. So like, there's a lot of people in the church that love the sort of like very sort of structured tradition, maybe not a lot of excitement or whatever. And by simply changing the structure of it and to make coming to church something that people would enjoy, they had to revisit it. It was still church. It was still, all the things were the same.
Right.
It was just they changed it in a way that is palatable for a newer generation.
Right. And maybe my university experience was unique, but I had professors who had to deploy some interesting, like performativity, I guess, or what have you, to make the material more interesting. I assume people like me with my attention span wouldn't be able to sit through like a 4-hour professor droning about something and like not engaging the audience. So yeah, I can completely appreciate you know, taking that same material, trying not to bastardize it, but doing it in a way that pulls more people into it.
Yeah, exactly. That's also been one of the tensions inside of writing it is like, you know, there's times where I feel like it's too academic. There's times where I feel like it's not academic enough, but also wanting to make sure that it's accessible to as many people as possible in terms of how it's written.
Yeah.
And in particular, targeting people who maybe typically don't read books or they don't read them cover to cover in a week like an avid reader would.
Yeah.
They can read it structurally, one chapter at a time, come back to it and feel like, you know, they're picking up at a place where they understand still everything that they've read previously and they can continue to move forward with it. You know, a parent who doesn't have a lot of time to read but could, you know, do a couple pages a day or, you know, whatever the case may be. And so I think in a huge way, I've tried to cover like a really broad set of expectations.
Yeah.
Whereas like the traditional advice that you're given is to be like as narrow as possible. And so I guess I've been the architect of my own suffering in that way by taking it on. But it just feels like a project that like I'm called towards, whether it's difficult or not. I mean, if you go narrow, it's still going to be difficult too, and just in a different way.
Sure.
There's just maybe less examples of, I think, anyways, how to do it so broad.
Yeah, and I mean, you can also talk about target audience and medium. You know, like maybe in a book, you do have to go more narrow, but it affords you to do that on one specific topic, where you have other avenues where you can go broad. Or maybe the book is best suited for the broad stuff, and then you can be more targeted on the other things.
Yeah, and I think that's where I've landed, where the book will be broad, sort of, I guess, philosophical guideline of what's intended. And then from there, publish field manuals that allow me to go more narrow. So it's taking the thesis of transferable everything and then making it directly applicable to athletes, to parents, to business leaders and executives and coaches and so forth. So that's kind of been my solace of knowing that that's my intention long term. And so it's easier to sit with how broad it is, knowing that that's only going to be step one. It's going to set the stage, or it's intended to set the stage for everything that can come next, and it can be more narrow.
Right.
But reference back to that place. And that's where I think like maybe it is beneficial to take the time to restructure it, because, you know, the structure and the flow and the framework is going to be an integral part of the field manuals that come after it. So it's probably pretty critical that I get that right.
Some like broader things I wrote down, which I think we touched on, but I'll throw them out anyway, and we'll see if it sparks some conversation, was the tension between performance and work ethic, which we touched on, optimization versus capacity, work ethic versus talent, the fact that effort can be fun.
Yeah.
Consistency of effort over time, I think, is a very important thing. I don't think effort alone is enough. I think we can define what effort is, but if it's not continually applied, then you're not making the effort of deploying effort continuously, to say it in a stupid way. Hard work without the right goal is just movement. That's actually a paraphrase, I think, of what you said early on.
Yeah, so that sparks something that I intended to talk about, which is, you know, if we use the metaphor of going for a hike in the woods, you've got a map, you've got a compass, and you've determined the destination. So you've done a lot of the right things. You have the right tools with you. But if you didn't reference them, if you didn't intentionally move towards something, you could be the fittest person in the world and simply run circles in the forest. And you're deploying an incredible amount of work ethic. That's great and admirable, I guess. but it's not towards something. So, and we go back to where everything begins, and that's making a choice. What are we aiming towards? So you have a destination in mind. And then we have some of the tools, the map, the compass, representing some of the virtues that we have, maybe your preparedness, your physical fitness, and all of those things. Now, the effort you put towards that aim is going to be a predictor of your ability to get there or not. It doesn't mean you're guaranteed. If it's a lofty goal that's literally impossible, you can try and you can put all the effort you want. Doesn't guarantee you're going to get there.
Right.
But it does guarantee you're going to get close, or whatever close might mean. And
You'll
so
certainly get better at the very least.
absolutely. And so and that's why I think it's so important is like effort alone, work ethic alone means nothing. It has to be applied intentionally towards something.
Yes.
And with something in mind. And so the mapping compass, as an example, or the preparedness and your physicality to work towards that aim, all of those things in of themselves required work. It wasn't just the moment you showed up to hike through the forest to wherever you're trying to go to. You had to put work towards learning that map and understanding the terrain, towards understanding how does a compass work? What happens if it stops working? Do I have backup resources available with me? The preparedness you put into your physicality to be able to actually trek that distance. But if you just showed up, even with those things, but you put no effort towards learning them, and you didn't put intentional effort towards referencing them, and all you did was deploy effort and work ethic, and you just ran through the forest, the probability that you're going to get to where you intended to go to is very, very, very low.
Right.
And it's the exact same thing. And so I think that's why I think you're right. I think because just like I said, between the map, the compass, the preparedness and the physicality and all of those things required effort before you showed up to that moment in the forest. And the effort, the humility is that undercurrent, because you have to deploy humility on the way within those virtues as well. It's like, I might be lost.
Right.
Okay, let me re-reference, let me reorientate myself to where I am. I was almost certain I was going in the right direction. Well, that's not a reflection of who I am as a person. It's simply, the conditions of trying to navigate a forest.
Yeah, you used the word preparedness twice, and for some reason that blew up in my mind both times you said it. You need to be prepared. Even before you start to deploy effort, I think. There needs to be, I don't know, it's like cyclical almost. They're occurring at the same time. You need to make the effort to prepare to make the effort.
Absolutely. And so I think I've said this before, is like, I do see the framework as cyclical. Like it's this constant state of working in a circle, because every step requires the other step.
Yeah.
At each new step.
Yeah, and in some way, shape, or form, the deployment of one will help you learn the other.
That's right.
And they reinforce one another.
That's right. And it's this ongoing circle at each stage you take towards the inevitable outcome, which is hopefully that you achieve your end goal, or you're just extracting a lesson to be learned from it.
Yeah, effort is a fun one.
Yeah, I think there's a lot baked inside of it, but hopefully, at the very least, anyone who's listening, I encourage you to sort of spend your own time trying to unpack, what does effort mean? What's the story you've been telling yourself about effort more broadly, or how you deploy it, when you deploy it, with what level of intentionality? These are the questions that I would encourage everybody to ask of themselves, because so much of it is different for each person. Also, are you deploying effort in a proactive approach, a reactive approach, at least where you have some controllables? What could you do to change that level of effort? Are you putting forth effort for yourself or is it for other people?
Right.
Are you leaving your cup depleted, or do you get to pour those resources from a place of abundance? It's a really, really deep philosophical question to ask yourself. And
Sure.
when I asked myself that and really reflected on it, it was uncomfortable. Turns out I'm pouring from depletion. Part of that is to be of service to everybody else, because for some reason, the story I've told myself about that's the only way to be of service to others, rather than your ability to be of service from a place of abundance. The more I have to give and to share and to support the people that you love and care for. And so I think through that, there's a lot of questions that I would encourage people to ask, and where do they come from?